everybody in this theater is a giant sucker, especially you!
It's the Simpsons Movie, released in 2007 during a time when the Simpsons TV run was clearly declining, and I wasn't planning on making this a series of this movie's coming back with a sequel too, but apparently every film I choose to pick up has been announced to have a sequel in the works. Also, the film features yellow skin colored people on a white background as their box art. But hey, if it gives me an excuse to use that succulent video title again, I guess I'd better take it. So let's see what could be in store for us soon by looking back at a relic of the past. The Simpsons Movie came out when I was about 10 years old, and pretty much everybody I knew went and saw it. Makes sense, right? This franchise is one of the most iconic forms of TV entertainment ever, spanning several decades and being one of the most prominent voices of long-lasting comedy. Whether that's in its golden age from many years ago, or in the warped version it has now become on the internet through memes, edits, and strangely emotive music videos, And though I knew so many people that watched this film, none of us really talk about it all that much after it had passed. Many of its quotes have been burned into my memory and regurgitated over the years, sure.
This is the worst day of my life.
The worst day of your life so far.
But I and many of my friends haven't actually revisited it since it came out 12 years ago. Reviews for this film were great upon release, clearly a breath of fresh air harkening back to more archaic Simpsons quality, though some said that it was somewhat blander and just another blip on the franchise's agonizing decline. So let's see for ourselves, shall we? Let's revisit back to the legendarily dysfunctional world of Springfield. Now, I'm still trying to find my footing on what I'd like my format style of videos to be, so while in the past I've just gone through films chronologically, this time I'll be working my way through each character's individual journey as kind of segmented points. Now, The Simpsons have been pretty notorious for their prophetic writers predicting the future in many different scenarios, and with this trailer it was very much the same, predicting what was probably a pretty obvious industry trait of big-name animation companies shying away from 2D animation in favor of computer-generated 3D greatness. And The Simpsons knew this willingly, and calling out that they were against the norm. Cool. Though awfully ironic considering there's a lot of CGI work in this film. From little things like certain camera motions, the massive fire mob, Mr. Burns' entire mansion during the end credits, or the entire destruction of the Simpsons family house. Guess they really wanted to make that money shot, huh? So anyway, the general broadest explanation of the plot before going into each character is the idea that Springfield has a pollution problem, and at its absolute worst, the government decides to drop a glass dome over all of Springfield to eradicate it from the world for environmental reasons. Only the Simpsons family escapes, they each have their own gripes, and they go off to save Springfield again, resolving personal conflicts along the way. Simple enough, right? Now, everything kinda kicks off at the funeral of Green Day, who died through pollution at a concert. Gotta get those celebrities in there, I guess. It also shows off some pretty good jokes, from the lyrics of the remixed Simpsons theme tune to the funeral being an organ cover of American Idiot. So it's here that Grandpa is possessed and prophesizes the destruction of the town, and only Marge pays him any attention. Not even the old codger himself really cares after the fact. So with the concept started, each character has their own paths in Springfield. Obviously, it's a new day in a very well-known town, so the film tries to cram in as many characters as it can into the story for some good old-fashioned fan service. Take Marge, for example. Her subplot in Springfield is simply trying to work out what Grandpa's ramblings mean, putting together his words on a fridge and asking advice from comic book guy. This subplot isn't really the most investing, but I get why it's there. It's the necessary logical strand that sticks to the main point of the film. It's her that realizes that the pig Homer brings home is part of the problem, and foreshadows a few other events as well. But while she's in Springfield, this is pretty much all she does, and I think it's the start of one of the Simpsons movie's greatest flaws, and that's that we know many of these characters through and through, and there are so many to get through in a short 88 minutes, somehow our main characters still seem awfully underdeveloped despite all of that. This isn't always the case, but there are 4 major Simpsons characters, and they don't all take the central spot. Or worse than that, their roles are awfully unbalanced. So like, we see that Marge in Springfield doesn't get to much, and her real role comes in once the story picks up and the family escape from the dome and run away to Alaska. Obviously, the whole concept of that is a bit far-fetched, as it's just a plan Homer supposedly had in the back of his mind this whole time, but the rest of the family just aren't that into it. The others have an actual life back in Springfield, and Marge is against the idea of abandoning Springfield because it's simply not the right thing to do. So with this being the major conflict for the family, Marge's role comes into the spotlight with her relationship with Homer being strained after his idiotic and admittedly just unlikable behavior. This strain causes the family to split and Marge to start seeking some individuality away from Homer. You know, the same as always, really. And what do you know, right at the end, everything turns out alright again. The whole third chunk of the film about returning to Springfield has Marge basically invisible, with her literally not doing anything except shouting a line in a megaphone. Her prevalence in this film is clearly only needed for the middle bit. Everything else just isn't fleshed out for her. And that's gonna be a running theme with pretty much the rest of the cast. Let's flip over to Lisa instead. She basically has the carbon copy problems as Marge, but for the opposite portions of the story. Lisa's the intelligent environmentalist type we all know, and with the film being all about pollution, that should all line up quite nicely to her, right? So she starts the film unsuccessfully going door to door trying to talk about environmentalist ideals, which the Springfield residents aren't much of a fan of. Eventually she meets entirely original Irish character Colin to fall in love with, which... okay, I guess they really just wanted to thrust in a romantic plot in there so that she has something to strive for backing Springfield rather than just wanting to abandon it with Homer, but even still, to me it felt a bit ham-fisted to just introduce someone entirely new to anchor part of the film around. Plus, like, now that she's in love, she becomes drastically less interesting as a character, as all of her actions are held back by this single plot strand. She gushes about him to Marge briefly before being interrupted by Homer's pig antics. She sets up an environmental conference which doesn't go well. Why is Colin just playing dreamy guitar music in the background in this scene? I get that it's to distract her, but like, why? He seems so unfocused on the task at hand, but it's not like he's secretly evil or anything, he's just there to be ogled at, I guess. And once the mob storms towards the Simpsons, he's there as a single ally, and they have a brief moment across the dome, which is sure is funny, I guess, but then the whole middle section of being away from Springfield has Lisa barely doing anything at all. She contributes to simple gags, and thematically she lines up to go against Homer, but she doesn't actually do much. You know, her opinions are clear, but this whole middle ground is just for Homer and Marge to be fleshed out. I think a lot of this just kind of comes down to how short the whole film is. I mean, it's just 88 minutes. If it wanted to, this film could have easily squeezed in an extra 10, 20, maybe even 30 extra minutes of character fleshing to add to everybody's roles. We barely see Marge interact with Lisa beyond that brief pig scene, and what have we got to see more interactions with the main characters against each other, especially with Homer not actually being in the center of it all. I want a genuine moment between Bart and Lisa, both wanting their old lives back with the people they're interested in. Something to put more heart and weight into these iconic characters. But skipping over the middle, like Lisa pretty much does, once she returns to Springfield, she goes to find Colin in her final moments. And then she does. I mean, yeah, there's a whole joke with Milhouse here, but then she's not even there for the final climax of the film. There's literally a compilation of all of Lisa's moments with Colin from this film, and it's not even 3 minutes long, and that's basically our whole arc. Like, I get that romance plots are good audience pleasers and the movie needed something to keep Lisa hooked on the idea of Springfield, but this just felt like a betrayal of her character, turning her from an individual with smart ideals and a drive to make change into a beggar of love whose sole purpose is to be with a boy, and then have her do nothing worthwhile in the film and practically ignore all of the environmental problems around her because she's got someone's hand to hold now. Yay. Her subplot especially could have gone in much more interesting directions or been handled entirely differently to create a much more investing point to her character. Even just something as simple as Colin being the son of Antagonist Cargill, another somewhat original character to the movie, both being environmentalists and maybe being a twist for Lisa to realize what's really important. Human life, or natural life, or maybe finding some compromise in between with Colin. I don't know, just something. And actually, speaking of Cargill, let's move on to him for a minute. Hopefully I'm pronouncing his name right. I never actually picked it up in the movie, but oh well. He's our new antagonist for the film and drives the part of the plot that seems a little out there. You know, the giant glass dome part of the film. Now he clearly has a drive, right? After discovering how toxic the Springfield Lake is and how it's affecting the wildlife, he sets up 5 environmental plans to improve the scenario and pitches it to President Schwarzenegger, who's just great by the way.
I was elected to lead, not to read.
This invariably makes the government go forth with the plan to drop the dome on Springfield, and Cargill is the one to supervise the whole operation. Pretty classic antagonistic stuff, not too evil yet, but you get it. Then when the family escape the dome, he's very suddenly switched on to being a bit more wacky.
Sir, I'm afraid you've gone mad with power.
Of course I have.
And like, I get that, but give it more time to breathe, please. And show us this character development. Don't just say it in a forced background line. Is that supposed to be part of the joke? The future scenes we see with him clearly show him being mad with power, but there's no real build up to it. One scene he looks fairly normal and professional. The next, he's a completely new character, manipulating the president to get exactly what he wants. By the end of the film, he's no longer smart, just easily tricked and pretty desperate to get what he wants. And while that's kinda disappointing considering the real threat he seemed to be at the start of the film, it makes for an effective enough development if it actually developed into it. But because it's literally like a switch that turns on between the scene where he explains the dome and the very next scene of him trying to find the Simpsons, it just feels forced and unsatisfying. Even something as simple as stopping for a moment after the president picks his choice and smirking to himself, realizing the power he now has, or a look at him after the hologram, realizing how small the people of Springfield are from his perspective. Something to make it lean a little more into the events, you know? But enough of Cargill, let's actually switch to the character with probably the best and most investing character development strand in the whole film, Bart. His story is similarly a pretty simple one, but it surprisingly hosts a lot of emotional weight and really kinda calls out Homer for many of his iconic moments. So Bart, after hanging out with his dad being his dad, comes to realize that he's kind of missing the love of a caring father, like Flanders gives his kids. Homer chooses to embarrass him across town and shift the blame away, as well as put him in dangerous scenarios for fun and give more love to a pig he found one day. So with this emotional baggage, Bart ends up getting close to Flanders, who's clearly a much more doting father. Also, before I go farther about fatherhood, can I just say that the whole skateboarding across Springfield naked segment was probably my first experience of wishing I hadn't gone to the cinema with my mum, because I distinctly remember my stomach just dropping during that one moment where Bart's penis is shown exclusively on the massive scene in front of us, and no thank you. Ugh. Anyway, with Flanders, Bart goes fishing, mountain climbing, and drinks some hot chocolate that garnered far more attention from the internet than I would have ever imagined.
Oh my god.
And with a seemingly happier life, Bart is now thrust back into the world of exile alongside everyone else. Now, I know I've already explained about Lisa's lack of a part during this whole Alaska sequence, but Bart has very much the same kind of problem, though it's articulated at least a little bit better. Instead of wanting Colin, Bart wants a genuine father, which is something he can theoretically get from Homer still. And Bart knows this, going out of his way to conflict with Homer and demanding that he wants to be back with Flanders, a bit more of a heavy-hitting point compared to some 8-year-old boy Lisa met like yesterday. Now, despite that stronger theme to run with, the film still doesn't do much with it. Bart draws on a photo once, but that's about it. I mean, he also causes an avalanche gag, cause Bart gotta be Bart, but otherwise he similarly just becomes a background character. And it's a shame, cause this plot point in particular has more options going for it. What if Bart reconciles with Marge, or Lisa and him bond over their similar wishes, or just does anything more substantial than waits for his next cue to be relevant again, back in Springfield? Cause once he's back, things go great again for him. With a bomb set to destroy everything within the dome, Bart chooses to spend his final moments not with his biological father, but with that friendly neighbor praying in church. Like, just that concept is such a strong moment of development for him, and also makes it seem like maybe he can outgrow Springfield one day. A life with Flanders will show him his true potential to become something, if he wasn't gonna die in a few minutes. And as the final resolution, Homer comes back finally aware of his problems as a father, somewhat, and offers him to join in on saving the world.
I'll let you hold the bomb.
The man knows me.
And together, they do. Honestly, I do still think it's a bit ham-fistedly fast and rushed, but that more comes from Homer's fault here more than anything else. Bart as a character, I'd say, probably gets the best spot in this whole film, and I really wish he could have been expanded even more, but I certainly wouldn't say his arc of all things was a major disappointment. So let's get to our final guy, shall we? Homer Simpson is clearly meant to be the main character of this film, and if there's any parts of the plot that you haven't pieced together from this jumbled retelling, hopefully his last beats here will piece it all together. Homer continues to be the idiot doofus we've seen over the years, whether it's through failing to do his chores with Bart, looking after him unsafely, or by urging him to skate across all of town naked, only to shift blame away from himself. In his ignorance, he's blissfully unaware of Bart's dissatisfaction, and instead invests all his time in a pig he found.
No, we can't. He's a pig. Look out, he is a spider pig.
With the pig, he plays about, looks after it, and talks about kissing it, much to everyone's dismay. The pig existing, not the pig kissing thing. And when being told to get rid of the literally leaking silo of waste created by the pig, Homer disregards all of the newly elected signs and dumps it right in Lake Springfield, officially being the final straw to make it a completely toxic dump. With this being the inciting incident that truly thrust the film forwards, causing government action and that big glass dome. And all of this established that Homer is 1, an idiot, 2, disregarding the people around him, and 3, an unwelcome danger to Springfield. And once his deeds are discovered to be his fault, an angry mob comes to lynch them all, even though they said they just wanted Homer. And also, the whole family runs with him anyway. Like, I can understand Marge and Maggie going along with it, but Lisa's the environmentalist, and Bart has a chance of a good fatherhood here. Whatever. They're all chucked into it anyway. Oh, and that whole spider pig thing, or Harry Plopper? Yeah, he's not relevant to the plot anymore. He pushes the family down into their fate, even though apparently it was him trying to get onto the thing, but I don't believe that for a second. And then we don't see him again. He appears in the TV show sometimes, but otherwise, who cares? The writers certainly didn't want to pay that off. The family managed to escape through more environmental problems that were actually foreshadowed earlier, and their sinkhole escape route destroys the entire house and presumably the pig as well. I swear this one shot must have been one of the ones they used to pitch this film. It just seems too much of a memorable concept, you know? Now, since Homer is the main character, he has a role in every segment. Homer's the one leading the charge away from Springfield, and without a car or money, he gambles his remainings away to win a truck to help them. I assume it came with gas money as well, otherwise I guess you're just not supposed to think about this bit too much. Homer shows off his plans to move to Alaska, and when confronted by the family to go back to Springfield, he's basically like, yeah, no, I'm not gonna do that. Only causing more tension with the family, trying to be the most unlikable character possible, I guess. And it does kinda come out of nowhere. He's a doofus who made a mistake and is now spiteful for it biting him in the butt? Willing to shoot down his family's dreams for one of his own? I've heard there's a lot of problems with modern day Simpsons, and though I haven't watched episodes in a long while, from what I can gather, some people say that the characters have just become unrelatable and excessively unlikable, or that the story has overtaken genuine character depth, and if I'm to use this as an example, I can see it here too. Homer's outrage seems more like a necessary reason for the family to go against him rather than him having a genuine motive for what he does. Similar to Lisa having a boyfriend to actually be on the right side of the argument, but whatever. So the family run away to Springfield by themselves, and Marge pulls out the Chekhov wedding tape to really hit Homer in the feels.
This is the end. I taped this over our wedding video.
And this is the moment that Homer has his redemption. That's his whole arc, right? And I like this idea. The thought of taping over a wedding video is intensely emotive, and would be really powerful if it didn't take 3 seconds to turn around. I mean, sure, there's a build-up of Homer doing bad things and the whole Alaska segment exists for a while, but somehow to me, it all just feels too 180, too fast. Like, the moment it becomes an issue, Homer turns it around. This moment would be more powerful if it just wasn't rushed so much. What if Homer tries to continue without them for a while, realizes he's a shell without them after some time, and then he finds the tape rather than just being given it with a goodbye letter? Something to give it more weight beyond just the concept of it. Anyway, from there, things get weird. Homer is saved by some Deus Ex Machina medicine woman, as she's called on the wiki. He learns he must save Springfield to save himself. He goes dog sledding to go back, and somewhat returns to Springfield. His family is captured by the EPA and thrown back into the dome, with a newly placed bomb put in, set to go off very soon. Homer attempts to climb into the dome, which only ruins the citizens' last hope of saving themselves, and finds a motorcycle, because of course he does. He reconciles with Bart in a seemingly ham-fisted way and races up the dome a la that gambling game. They remove the bomb and Springfield is saved. The dome is shattered, Cargill is defeated, and Homer and Marge ride off into the sunset, finishing his redemption story, being a little less of an idiot when it's needed, helping the people around him, and being a welcome citizen of Springfield once again. And with all of that, the credits roll. And that is the plot of the Simpsons movie, from like 5 major angles it goes through. So with all of the underdeveloped characters, ham-fisted subplots, overly rushed turnarounds, unsatisfying element finishes, and skipping out on the climax of the film entirely, what did I think of this film 12 years on? I liked it. And I think the vast majority of everyone else who came to see it in cinemas felt the same way. 'Cause you see, while this film has a lot of flaws, especially in the logical story department, there is one thing that the Simpsons movie did really, really right. Jokes. Simple enough. As I said before, the movie came out in 2007, at a time when the Simpsons TV series was clearly declining in quality. And whether you find that's characters being caricatures, caricatures being characters, or just bad ideas being put together, one thing that undeniably changed is the jokes. Doesn't matter if it's the content of the jokes that have changed, or just how it's formatted, but generally, people were finding The Simpsons to be failing on its jokes and making people laugh. And the Simpsons movie is funny. It's got some really good jokes throughout. Notice how despite all these plotline discrepancies, I was pretty much always complimenting the jokes around them? And beyond just jokes, the movie is endlessly quotable. From Spider Pig to Harry Plopper. And I was elected to lead, not to read. These are the very basic must-haves to make a grand Simpsons adventure, and the people love it. I can see why. Stretching what is normally a 22-minute short into a feature-length film is clearly no easy task, and though elongating it further would probably have made some fleshing out improvements, we don't sit down to watch the investing plot of what happens to Springfield's environmental wasteland. By the end of the film, the whole environmental part is dropped. Springfield is disgusting still, and it isn't erased. The people might be better people now, but probably not. Still, what we come to see when we watch the Simpsons movie is The Simpsons. We want to see their wacky antics, and this film gives us that in droves. There's a monumental amount of fan service to be seen. All sorts of characters make all sorts of appearances, and even if they don't get full subplots, you can kind of see how many of them interact with the world and its new scenario. If you're a fan of The Simpsons, you'll simply enjoy The Simpsons movie, because it's very classic. Any kind of emotionally story-driven weight is just a bonus. It still has a happy ending, and by the end, the characters can still easily incorporate into the next season of the TV series. You get all of your beats out of what you want to see from each character, assuming you just like looking at Lisa giggling in that one example, I guess, and you'll leave the film being somewhat satisfied. Critically analyzing it, you can see the flaws, but just sitting on a couch and watching it because it's easy and fun? That's where the Simpsons movie really shines, I think. And as those credits roll, you even get some more fourth wall breaking family action.
Her first word. Sequel?
Yes, Maggie. Apparently, since August of last year, another sequel is set to be making its way. In light of even more declining ratings, perhaps this movie can be yet another jump right into the good stuff. If I could make requests, I'd want a longer runtime, allowing for more fleshing out of the characters and less ham-fisted motions and inserts. But as long as the jokes are funny, the moments are memorable, and the script is incredibly quotable, The Simpsons Movie 2 won't be having too hard a time to wave people over to enjoy some good old-fashioned television, just like the Golden Age. Or so we'll hope. Let's just hope the world hasn't gotten too critical over the last 12 years. Good luck with that one, Simpsons. Anyway, for now, my name's been Dazz, you didn't really care, and I'll see you in a bit. And hey, you may have noticed I've got a green screen. I'd like to use it more and make it more part of my format, but if you have your own suggestions on how to use it or any other feedback you'd like to see for future videos, then do let me know. Polishing up my video formats is all part of the fun.